all, this is Kade, and this is day 9 and the final manufacturing day, of course, of the IAE 2952. And we are looking at Robot Space Industries, including their freshly released Galax class ship. So without further ado, let's take a quick gander. We'll start with the layout table, see where everything is, go over it quickly as usual, and then we go and take a look around. Let's see, let's start top right this time with the Aurora series, and there's also a Mantis. Gonna be very short with that. The Aurora series, not recommended anymore really. If you need to start the ship, probably better off with a cutter. And beyond that, the starter ships don't really have a lot of value besides being a starter ship, so you don't really need them otherwise. Mantis, extremely useful for any organization that is looking at doing combat style operations. So it doesn't matter on which side of the law you're in, you're going to be needing the Mantis to stop whatever you're trying to catch from running away. So in that regards, if you have an organization that does that kind of work, you're going to need the Mantis. It is literally that simple. And the center hall, we have the Constellation series. Especially like when it comes to the Towers and Andromeda, they're still reasonably good value ships and they have a good capability. My argument ever is that the interiors especially, they show their age. They were some of the first ships that were released by the game, of course, by Star Citizen and RSI, of course, making them. It gets almost confusing that RSI and RSI, but you know what I mean. They're just one of the oldest ships around, and it shows. I think that the devs have learned a lot when it comes to ship design, and especially also on the interiors. And I really hope that they will at some point come back to the Constellation series and give them a full-on refresh. Or what would be even cooler, in my opinion, is that they actually keep these old ones, but then release a new model. Like this is going to be the new Constellation series, we've completely overhauled it. That would be a really unique thing to do and would actually add a lot of flavor to the game as well. And it gives people a choice to keep the old ones or maybe change it to one of the new ones. When it comes to the Constellation Phoenix, it's really horrible in my opinion. Like the only point of that ship is the interior, and as I said, I think the interiors of the Constellation series are really poor. Just primarily the way the layout is going. So when it comes to being a luxury version of that, it doesn't really work in my book. But that's a more personal choice. When it comes to luxury ships, value is never there anyway. Aquila, of course, being an exploration variant of the Constellation, it does what it does, but we don't know what it does yet because exploration is not really in there. So right now I would not buy that one at all unless you prefer the way it looks. So for the other constellations and you really want to have a constellation. The Scorpius, our size heavy fighter, it looks amazing, but the Hurricane is simply better. Like, end of the story, no question about it. If you need a heavy fighter, two-person crew, you get yourself a Scorpius. Or not a Scorpius, you get yourself the Hurricane. That's much better. Like, it looks a lot uglier than the Scorpius in my book, but it's just so much better. So yeah, get a Hurricane. Lower level Ursa Rover, ground vehicle, usual thing applies. It's a ground vehicle, don't buy it. Just buy it in game. Then we have the Apollo series. Medical ships. Pretty much I think the largest medical ship that you're going to be seeing flying down to planets and back up all the damn time. I really like them, and I think they're going to be really useful for just about any organization. Especially if your organization is a medium size and up, you will need medical ships to support it. Because people will get injured, whether that is industrial accidents or combat operations. They are going to be very useful, and it sits in a really decent value bracket actually when you come down to it. They also have a flexible interior, so you can outfit them with a various degrees of beds. The best way to describe it is that it would have the technical space for up to 6 tier 3 beds, so that's the lowest tier of bed. And then you can switch and match them around. Of course, the way that works is like if you want to go then to a tier 2 bed, that means you go down to 2 beds instead of 3, and if you want to get a tier 1 bed, you just get 1 instead of the 3 tier 3s. Comes in 2 versions, the Triage and the Medevac. I believe the Medevac had slightly more firepower and armor. And a different paint scheme. Originally you could only buy that if you had scored a certain score in one of the mini games. I'm not sure that's still the case. Either way, really good ships to have. Polaris, the original Corvette, which I still say to this day is absolutely not a Corvette. It is a motor torpedo boat. Its job is to deposit really large size 10 torpedoes into whatever it finds to be offensive. Once it has done that objective and it has now realized that it has no more size 10 torpedoes left, its job is to get the hell out of there. And that's pretty much what a motor torpedo boat does. Drop your torpedoes, get out. And rinse and repeat. Just reload, drop them again, and get out. It is very pricey. You'll have to see, of course, by the end how pricey missiles and torpedoes are going to be in-game. That is going to determine a little bit how you're going to use them. What kind of people would need a ship is, if you're going to be running a combat organization, probably medium level and up, this ship could be a really nice Alpha Strike option against much larger targets. But it is still a relatively heavy investment, in my opinion, for such a level of Alpha Strike capabilities. And I think will be much better off with smaller torpedo bombers with size 9 torps, which can probably get close to the same job against most of the things that we will likely be fighting a lot of the time. Now, if you're planning to support the UE Navy and fight Vandal King ships, if that's going to be an option, then probably there's going to be a point to this thing. So yeah, it is honestly of the sub-capital combat vessels that are in the game, it is my least favorite because it is just a giant torpedo bomber. That's really the role that it's going to fill. The hangar on it, honestly, for the role that it does, it feels kind of pointless. So I'm not really sure about it, but I believe they were going to do some reworking on the interior and stuff, so I hope that they also do some actual rethinking of the role of this ship. Then we have the Galaxy. RSI's latest offering, of course, complete new ship design, multi-role, as in you can change out a center section for currently 3 different modules, cargo, medical and a refinery option. It looks like a very compelling ship, and especially for a smaller level organization when it comes to the refinery option, that seems to be really, really good. For larger level organizations, I do like the medical option as well. Like, it fits the new Pisces R, of course, that is just seems to be custom made almost for the damn thing. And it gives you a really flexible medical package because it has all of the beds. So there's 1 tier 1 bed, 2 tier 2 beds and 3 tier 3 beds. So you have a really nice mobile little hospital. And that makes it really useful for, again, almost anybody. So that aspect is really useful. The refinery option for a smaller level organization is going to be useful because it allows you again to keep your mining assets on station longer because you're just emptying the bags. So you're just like, okay, I'll suck it up, refine it, and then of course what you're being left with is a much smaller form of package, which you then can probably just load onto a cargo vessel of some sort and they can bring it to wherever it needs to go. The cargo holding version is designed around large containers. So it can stack 8 of those per side, so 16 in total. The large containers are 32 SCU each. So that makes for a very healthy cargo capacity. So that's a decent option when it comes to cargo hauling, but it is relatively pricey at $450 for the ship plus the cargo module. That said, it does come with, of course, a really good level of componentry, good shields, power plants and doubles, so that's really good. And it comes with a fairly hefty level of firepower, actually. It was a surprise for me. They have given this ship 3 turrets with 2 size 5 weapons on each of them. Now, the turrets are very forward focused, so you are vulnerable from the rear. So it is definitely not a combat ship. These turrets are designed more as a somewhat of a self-defense option. Like, you don't really want to get into a combat situation with this vessel. But overall, it looks to be very interesting. And as I said, the refinery option and the medical option are definitely good buys for people depending on your level of organization. Finally, the Perseus, big gunship. Like, this is the partner to the Hammerhead. The Hammerhead shoots down the fighters and the Perseus shoots down the ships of its own class and higher. really like it, and I like the idea of a more gun-focused subcapital because this feels like a proper true Corvette. This is what it needs to be doing. It's out there and it is just trying to gun against ships of its own size and slightly above. It's not a ship that will deal well against fighters. Those big turrets will not be able to track them, but that's why you partner it with a ship like a Hammerhead. So when you're looking at a organization level, this is at least a medium size enough because you're looking at fielding multiples of these sub-capital class vessels, along of course with their escort and supporting units. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ships as they stand here. I'm not going to go to the Aurora Hull because there's really not much point to their being there. Constellation, the Taurus of course is the cargo hauling version, by far the cheapest as well. It sacrifices firepower to snap just to get a larger cargo bay. It does what it does, and it does it reasonably well at a reasonable value. So honestly, when it comes to the Constellation versions, it's not the worst vessel to have. But again, as I said, I do not like this interior. This interior needs just a lot of rethinking overall. The Constellation Phoenix, I mean, it is a luxury ship, and well, it is a luxury ship with the worst interior layout that they have developed, in my opinion, for a luxury ship. So yeah, if you want a luxury ship, just stick at looking at Origin for now until they rethink this. Like honestly, this thing feels weird, just weird. It has like some really nice features, but then you're like, okay, but where's my toilet? And then you're like, yeah, that's in the crew area over there. And just like, doesn't really add up, so to speak. So it just feels like, it feels like the conversion ship that it is. Like, you know, one of those conversion fans or something. Like, yeah, it offers a lot of things, but then it's still not the Rolls Royce or something. So it's, yeah. It is not a ship I can recommend for that reason. But if you really like the interior, then by all means you can go ahead and get a Constellation Phoenix. It's a luxury ship, so who cares about value? Scorpius. I mean, the main problem for the Scorpius is simply that the Hurricane exists. That's it. The Hurricane is just better. There's no question about it, there's no argument about it. The Hurricane is the better heavy fighter when it comes to two cruise heavy fighters. So the Scorpius just finds itself in this unenviable position where it's just like, okay, now what? And on top of that, I think it's also more expensive than the Hurricane. It's a shame really, because it is a really cool looking ship. But right now there is no point in owning one from a capabilities perspective. So as it stands, just let it stand here. Look at it. Ooh, it's pretty. And then go grab your mates and friends and okay, let's get the Hurricanes and actually blow things up. The Mantis, as I said, it is a absolute mandatory addition to any organization that plans to do any form of combat operations, bounty hunting, piracy. If you need to catch something, you need a Mantis. It is really that simple. Will we get more ships that can do the same role at some point? Probably. But for now, they're not there. So if you're gonna do it, you need a Mantis. End of story, no question about it. Get these ships for your organizations and run with them. The Aquila, the exploration version of the Constellation. I mean, it suffers from all the same problems that I think it has with the interior, but again, capability-wise, it seems alright. And these days, price-wise, it seems fine again in comparison to the other ships that were out there. Like for quite some time, like this ship felt too expensive compared to the Carrack when it was still much cheaper. But now, of course, nowadays, of course, the Carrack is a lot more expensive. And this ship seems to be fitting in its more, proper price role, because the Carrack was just, for Star Citizen means like too cheap for what it really offered for a long time. So again, if you're fine with the interior, this ship is definitely an option, but of course there is no exploration gameplay out there yet, so keep that one in mind. And then finally, the standard Constellation Taurus is of course, not the Taurus, the Andromeda. It's the standard. It has all the capabilities that you could ask for. The money is still not bad, so it's still a fairly good ship to have. But honestly, if you're looking at the idea of flying with a couple of people and you want to like, oh, shall we get a constellation? You really should be looking like, are you going to get a constellation or do you want to have like a Drake Corsair, for example? Because I think the Drake Corsair just beats this thing out in its interior, really. If you don't care about that, I still think capability-wise, probably the Andromeda is slightly better still. Now let's take a look downstairs at the holosuite stuff. Because this is where RSI's main and interesting ships are laying around, of course. They have been a long time capital grade manufacturer for the Navy. I think all of the big Navy ships are RSI ships. Lore-wise, so yeah. And also, of course, the smaller ones, like here, of course, the Apollo series. As I said, like, this is just a ship. If you got a organization, small probably you still want one, medium level and up, you definitely need medical style gameplay ships. And these things will be a really flexible solution for that. Now, they don't have the same medical flexibility as a Galaxy is going to have with a medical bay, of course, inside of it. But this thing can actually still land and extract the people on its own, which is something that a Galaxy will most definitely not be doing. For that, it is simply too large and too vulnerable. Of course, when it comes to smaller scale extractions, the Pisces 8R can also handle a lot of that and it can go to different places. But one of these, for example, could extract up to 6 people, put them on the tier 3 beds just to stabilize them, and then move them to a more proper medical facility somewhere. So it has a really strong sales pitch. It doesn't come in the cheapest, of course, but I still think it's very much a ship worth having. And if you're looking at like even just you and a friend or maybe 2 friends and you want to be like, hey, we want to do some search and rescue style of gameplay, this is really a cool ship to do that in. I think you're going to really have a lot of fun with it because it offers you that capability that you would really need for the full-on level gameplay. Probably at that point you would probably take like maybe at least one of the tier 1 bets and then either 2 tier 2s or 3 tier 3 bets. I'll probably go with the 1 tier 1 and 2 tier 2s. Because you know, you can always heal the smaller injuries on a higher grade bet anyway. So it offers you a lot in that regard. So honestly, when it comes down to the lineup of the not insanely expensive ships from RSI, this is really a nice one. And I think you can have a lot of fun with it. And it's going to be really, really useful. Our motor torpedo boat, the Polaris. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with this. Like, I'm ashamed that they were not ready on time with their stuff, they said, which is a little bit strange, but let's wait and see what will happen. Because I think, you know, if they make a lot of changes to this thing, it can suddenly become a really strong recommendation. But as it stands right now, I find it hard to recommend this ship because it is just a really large torpedo bomber. That's its main job, is to get those torpedoes onto a target and then to book you out of there. Because why would you keep a ship like this around in the combat zone? Yes, it has turrets, but it doesn't have really powerful turrets. It's a very large ship. It takes a lot of space is taken up by that hangar. And you're just looking all in that, and you just like, this ship feels like it was designed as somebody was like, I want it to be able to do everything. And, you know, I want it to be able to take on really large ships. I want to be able to take on small ships. I want it to have a small fighter on board. I want to be able to land. I want to have the ground vehicle. And if you add too much to ships of these sizes and these categories, they start to lose out. And I think the best example of how to do that, if I want to do multiple things and do it well, is of course the next bay over with their newly released Galaxy. Because here they just realized, yes, we wanted to do more things. But let's make it so that it does not do more things at the same time. So you choose. Am I going to be running cargo? Am I going to be playing a hospital? Am I going to be a refiner? Maybe they'll design a module that does have torpedoes in it. Like, why wouldn't you? It seems to be clear that it is a module that drops in and it has access from the bottom, so I could just have a carousel that just drop torpedoes out there. Boom, 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 shoo, 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 shoo. Off my torpedoes go. Like, this thing loaded up with, even if it's just size 9 torpedoes, you could probably fit a whole lot of them in there. Suddenly you're looking at a really, really dangerous ship. to mess around with. So yeah, this is how you design it properly. Like there's good things about the modularity systems, as in just like choose what role you need to fill, drop that in, and off you go. And I really like the design of the ship. Like this feels like really well thought out, and like the Polaris as well, because you have this rear access which could be used as a vehicle ramp, but also of course it's a hangar. Like we see a lot of the shots where we see an Argo MPV in there, and of course the Pisces is going to be flying in and out of there, especially the Pisces R when you do medical gameplay. It just seems like a really well thought out design. So yeah, price wise as well, it's not the cheapest, but it's definitely a ship that I could recommend without any issue. And I think because of that modularity, this is a ship where if you're going to start out maybe playing with yourself and a couple of friends, it is going to remain useful even if you decide to join a smaller organization or a large organization, or maybe you join a really large organization. Because of the capability that it already has with only the current 3 modules, it can provide you with useful, high-value gameplay additions to whatever level of game, size of gameplay that you're doing. And that makes it so strong. I think I will be making a full and dedicated video on the Galaxy in a bit as well. Just looking over the website a little bit more into detail, so probably upload that one tomorrow. But yeah, as it stands for now, the buyer's guide, really strong recommendation, best ship of the RSI lineup currently. And then finally we'll round it off with one of my personal favorites. Yes, it is the Vulnerable. Ooh, did they change the layout of a gun? I think they did. I need to check that for a second. Let's take a look. I'm gonna quickly, I'll talk over it and see if I can find the old screenshot. I thought that bottom gun was more towards the front as well. But yeah, this is of course the RSI Perseus. And I love the Perseus. It's the big gunship that I really always wanted. And that makes it, to me it's like this is the kind of ship that screams I am a Corvette at you. And that is something that not all of the ships have done. I think that's when they are being released as Corvette, because the Hammerhead was also released as a Corvette, but it is clearly an escort ship. Which of course Corvettes traditionally did. So that aspect did it reasonably well, but they don't really call it a Corvette, I think, still. This thing is really, okay, I've got some big guns, I'm designed to shoot at things my own size and up. I'm here not to play around. That's what the Perseus is saying. And in exchange for that, when it comes against fighting smaller things, it doesn't really have a lot. Like I got a small turret there, it's just like, okay, you little fighter, go away, go away. But if somebody shows up, of course, with a torpedo bomber, this thing is going to have a little bit of a harder time. However, anything that's going to be fighting this thing that is of its same size or higher is also going to have a really poor time. Because those size 7 guns will probably shred a lot of the opponents with a fair amount of ease. So I do expect this thing to see a good bit of use when it comes to being around in the combat, in the verse, in combat a lot of the time. It's suspicious. I don't see any of the old screenshots. I'll see if I can find them on my PC at some point. But yeah, Perseus, gunship, really powerful, really good fleet defense ship, and also of course an offensive ship. It is also the largest ship that I would recommend when it comes to combat ships for a non-combat style organization. Now the reason behind that is that this ship has a degree of firepower available to it that is like just enough to deal with anything pretty much up to a Kraken and Idris size ship. Like not alone, it will definitely need some escort of course to do that, and it probably wants to group up. But it can do it, and most importantly it can do it at a relatively low crew investment requirement. And that's what makes this ship so strong versus a lot of the other options that you have out there when it comes to larger combat ships. this ship runs on a crew of 6 people. I mean, a crew of 6 people is what you probably be running in quite a few industrial ships as well. So having that in there means that you can have the ship around. You don't need to keep an NPC crew on hand for it. So you have them parked in case they are needed. And if you need them, you pull them out, you can go into combat, and you have a really capable ship. And you can deal with a lot of threats, like combining the Perseus with a Hammerhead, and maybe if you want to add a Polaris in there as well. These are the highest grade of ships that you're going to be running in a non-combat organization, to have them as a combat unit, as a backup. Because you want to be able to deal with a certain level of threat yourself, if you're of course running a larger scale organization. Because that's also what you'll be looking at, like how large is my organization, what is realistic as a threat that I need to defend myself against. If you are like, okay, but I come across something that is too high, at some point like you need to be looking at hiring, of course, a PMC organization to be like, hey, deal with this shit. Like if a very large organization would come after us, for example, and at some point you're just going to be like, hey, we keep mercenary organizations on retainer, and be like, guys, you're hired, please blow those people up because they're getting annoying and we cannot deal with them. So really good ship to have around for that reason. And of course, if you're in a combat organization, it is a really strong asset, because again, it is 6-man crew. It brings you 4 size 7 guns to the field, which are a credible threat against capital grade ships. So it cannot be ignored, but it's still a not too high of an investment vessel to keep around. And of course, it has one added bonus: it is not hull limited. So if you're running a large organization and you can only get so many Krakens and Idrises on your hands, you can get a lot of these ships around. And they're smaller, they're cheap to operate, they don't need NPC crews. So value-wise, these things are actually really good when it comes to the operational side of things as well. So yeah, of the 3, it's by far my favorite. But I would not fly it alone. You definitely need an escort, or fly them in combination with Hammerheads. And then if you really need an additional punch, you can bring in the Polaris as a torpedo bomber, but really consider it then just to be a torpedo bomber. So that was it. We have ended IAE, as in all of the days. We'll probably get one day like with the best in show stuff and things like that. I may make another video depending on what is going out there. I will be going over, make a video on the Galaxy class probably tomorrow and release that tomorrow, so that we can take a bit more of a look in detail on the Galaxy class and how it compares to some of the other vessels out there. Because I do think it's really strong, but it's always good to, you know, take a look at the numbers. They do not lie to you. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and once again, I hope it has been somewhat informative in helping you to decide what ships to buy. Probably after the IAE, I will be going to look at making some videos more as to like how you can build ships, and also how you can build your fleet up. So whether that's your personal fleet, organizational style fleets, and all these things. Just looking at different roles and how things fit into each other and how the entire chain comes together. Because of course, the larger you go, the more complicated the whole system gets. And that's something to be keeping in mind of in general, and I think something that some people forget at times. So I think it can be a really interesting topic to go into. So yes, that will be the return, I hope, of the Star Citizen Topics series. So with that all out of the way, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see each other again. Bye bye.